Yeah.
I still try to give by donating. I mean, by volunteering.
Yeah. You do what you can. Yeah, that's how I knew. Okay, good evening, everyone. How's it going? Everybody ready for the pop quiz? Sure, right? Why not? The pop quiz happens when you go in and you actually have your interview. That's the main pop quiz that you get. So I'm Kevin Ahern, for those of you who don't know me. And I am happy to do this second part of the interview session. I had originally envisioned it as one, and for those of you who were at the last one, we got interrupted by the fact that they only let us have the room for 1 hour, and I had asked for an hour and a half. So there was a class, or I guess an exam in there, so we got chased out. So I thought, rather than argue with them, and they were a lot bigger and meaner than we were, I thought we would do a second one. And by doing a second one, it allows me to expand a fair amount from what I did before. So before I start, I'll say I teach a class in the Honors College entitled Scientists in the Public Eye. And it's a class in which we go through all the things I'm doing here in a very abbreviated form here. In the class, it goes for a full term. It's a 2-credit class. And in that class, we do things like I videotape students answering some of these questions, and we analyze both the content of their answers as well as the way they look. And that's as important as anything. And I'm not going to say too much tonight about how you look. I said a lot of that in the first session, but it's important in thinking about your interview to think about that image that you're projecting to the person or persons who are interviewing you. Okay? Very, very important. Very briefly, I will say that one of the most important things to think about, both in terms of how you look and how you sound, is how old you are. And I gave some examples last time about that. I'm not going to go through those here. But most people sound younger than they are, and most people look younger than they are. They certainly look younger than the interviewer does. And that works against you, both of those. So when you think about being a physician and dealing with life and death matters, you probably don't want to think of a teenager working on you. And that's a really important consideration. And so to that interviewer, you may not think about it, but you may very well look and or sound like a teenager. And that's not who I want handling my life and death matters. Nobody does. Okay? So keep those things in mind as you're going forward. What I'm going to do tonight, as I said, is I'm not going to go through and repeat things I said the other night for the most part. I thought what I would do is I would go through some very common questions that students get asked, that I ask students, that other people ask students. And I'm going to work with you on that, and I'm going to ask you those questions, and then I'm going to analyze your answers. Okay? So I'm not going to pick on you, but I will ask for volunteers for that. And I would like to, and again, I'm probably just going to tell you what's right or what's wrong about what you have to say. Okay? So don't take things personally. I'm here to help you. All right? I will talk about just standard questions, and I will talk also about this new format that's called MMI. And MMI stands for multiple mini interviews. And these multiple mini interview formats, people get all worried about. They think they're very, very different. They're just a complete turning upside down of the interview process. And they're really not. And so some of the basic principles I'm going to show you about interviewing tonight will carry over into your MMI, as I hope you will see. Okay? So MMIs are different in that they are longer. That's the main thing. And so there's some considerations for longer. My basic principle, or basic rule I give to students in terms of answering interview questions, with the exception of the MMI, is that no answer you give to a question should run longer than 2 minutes. 2 minutes. You go longer than 2 minutes, I don't care what you're talking about, you are dominating the conversation and you're getting boring. So you need to make sure that everything that you have to say is going to fit in a 2-minute time frame. And that's important because one of the questions you're going to get asked is what I call the who are you question. Okay? And the who are you question is very critical because that who are you question is the most important question you're going to be asked. Okay? So let's start right there. Who are you? In my interview class, we start with this question. And it's a question that you don't usually get asked directly. But what's behind the questions that you do get asked are this right here. You're being asked to define yourself. The way that the question is usually asked is, why do you want to be a doctor? Okay? Why do you want to be a doctor really means, who are you? I want to know who you are. I want you to tell me who you are, and by the time you're done telling me who you are, I want to feel like you're right for medicine. Now there's a challenge. You're going to compress your life story into 2 minutes, and you're going to convince them by the end of this that you're right for medicine. Okay? Whoa. Now, there's some other principles that go with this. Okay? So as I say, it's the most important question. It's usually asked, why do you want to be a doctor? They might say, why do you think that you would fit into our program? They might say, why should we take you for our program? They're all the same question. They're all a who are you question. The reason we start with this question in my class is that it defines the whole term. Okay? It defines the whole term because this is the most important question, and this forms the basis of the personal statement that we work on later in the term. The personal statement is another way of defining yourself. And it's one that actually precedes the who are you in the interview because you wrote that personal statement for the application long before they decided to interview you. In fact, that personal statement that you wrote was the reason that they're interviewing you. They like what they saw in that personal statement. Okay? Remember that. All right. This is one of only 2 questions that you should have an answer memorized for, and the answer should not look like it was memorized. Okay, now I've just given you a whole bunch of challenge. A whole bunch of challenge. You got 2 minutes to get out there to tell us your story and to not be boring and to just make it look like it's coming off the cuff and be relaxed about it the whole time. Okay? And you're sitting there just a bundle of nerves. And it's the first question. Am I setting the stage for you? Am I scaring you enough out here already? Everybody I work with hates this question. Everybody. And most people come to my office, because I work one-on-one with students on these also. They come to my office and I ask them this question, and they get very nervous, and they're very embarrassed because they feel like this is the one question that they should have the right answer for. So let me tell you what the most common answers are for this question. Okay? I'm very dedicated. I work very hard. I really, really want to help people. Okay? These are, I've had a lot of experience working with a doctor. I've seen medical situations, and I know what I'm getting into. This is what I want to do. I'm sure of it. Okay? In a summary, that's what the vast majority of the answers coming out of people's mouths are. Okay? And while the sentiment of all those is right, and the principle of all those is right, there's no way on earth you want to say any of that. Okay? There's no way on earth you want to say any of that. So let's think about what constitutes a good answer to that question. A good answer to that question tells a story. A story, okay? Your life is a story. Your answers are stories. Good answers are rooted in stories. And good answers of stories are rooted in your experiences, okay? One of the things you have to do here is sound 100% different. I shouldn't say 100% different, but you need to sound as different as you can from everybody else that they've been interviewing. Think about the fact they've been interviewing 20 people that day, and they've heard this same story over and over. I like people. I know this is what I want to do. I've got a lot of experience. I've seen all kinds of stuff. All right? They're all generic answers. They all blur together after a point. All right? Your answer needs to be rooted in your life story, and that life story needs to be colored with your interest in medicine. Okay? It's possible to answer that question without even using the word medicine. It's possible to do that. Okay? The impression I get from you, and I mentioned this in the first time around, the impression I get from you is the most important thing that matters. What I feel about you is going to give me an understanding about you as a person. Now, can I pick on somebody and ask them to give me their version of that answer? I won't be mean, I promise. And it's a good chance to just get it out. Come on. This isn't going to work unless somebody volunteers. Yes, please, thank you. So why do you want to be a doctor? I'm going to come up here and get the microphone so people out in TV land can hear it, okay? You're not on TV, don't worry.
I'd say because I've been through treatment for different things and I know how much it can help.
Okay.
and I want to share that with other people that
Okay.
are needing that help.
Okay, so that's a very good start. So what she says is that she's had treatments, and she knows what that's about, and she wants to share and help other people because she knows that what that's about. Is that a good summary? Okay. Now, I like part of what she has to say, but there's some things that's missing here. What's missing? Specifics. Okay. I want your story. I want your story. So when you say I've had some treatments, that could mean that I got cuts and I had iodine, right? That could mean that I had a headache, I took an aspirin. That could mean I had a tumor and I had it removed. All right? You're always in trouble when you leave this to the imagination of the interviewer. Okay? Your job in the interview is painting this picture as clearly as you can. Okay? So let me take your answer and tell you, I'll make up one. Okay? So let's say that I say, my experience with medicine is different than probably most of the people that you've interviewed before. Okay? When I was 17, I was diagnosed with a non-Hodgkin's form of lymphoma that threatened my life, and I wasn't diagnosed with it until it was fairly far advanced. And as a 17-year-old facing death for the first time, I thought I could never imagine what this experience was. I could never imagine what it would be like. But I've seen something from the time that I was 16 that some people never experience until they're old. And I went through treatments, and they scared the jabbers out of me. Okay? But what I learned in going through these treatments was the compassion of the people who worked on me, the dedication of the people, the years and years of training, the expertise that they had. And I was absolutely fascinated with what they had to do. And as I saw, I went with time and I got stronger because the treatments were actually wiping this thing out. I marveled at the fact that something that was deadly was actually being killed, and I was going to live as a result of that. And I was so inspired by this that I felt that I had to make a difference. And I knew what that was like, and I knew what that patient was like that was feeling that and being told for the first time they might die. And that's why I want to be a doctor. All right? Now, does that flesh that out? All right? So I've given you some details, I've given you some emotion, and I've given you something very, very important there. Okay? There's three things I want to hear in an interview: growth, insight, maturity. Growth, insight, and maturity. I hope I gave you all three of those in that answer. Now, in that answer, I also gave evidence of having had adult experiences. I went through something that a lot of people don't know until they're old and getting ready to die, right? I've seen a different kind of life than a person who hasn't been out there and lived, who's had everything ever taken care of, their every need taken care of, and they haven't had this experience, okay? When I hear this person has had this adult experience, I don't care how young they look, okay? I know that they've really had something that they can relate to that's going to make them a good physician, okay? Somebody else want to try? Yeah.
So when you're bringing up like a personal experience,
Yeah.
how personal is too personal?
Oh, very good question. So thank you for asking that question, actually. So our question was, if you bring up a personal experience, which is what you're doing in a personal statement, how personal is too personal? There's a place where this comes up. I'll talk about it later, but I'll just get you started here. I think you want to be as open and revealing as you can. But there's a limit. And the limit is that you cannot cry. All right? And there are some people who have experiences, and your experience might be one where you've had I don't know what your treatment was, but if you had a near-death experience of some sort, that could be something that makes you very emotional. And when you're in an interview situation and you're tense already, emotions spill over. And one of the things that you cannot do in an interview is cry. Because what you're saying is that this is so difficult for me that I'm crying. They're going to say, well, how can you handle a life and death situation? You can't. The only time you can cry in an interview is if you're talking about a death that has happened in the last 30 days. That's the only time. And even there, I would be careful. All right? So you have to gauge how comfortable you are with being very open and revealing. Will you get emotional with it? Okay? Now, I really want you to err as much as you can on the side of being open. I think that's very good. But I think that you should also talk to somebody else about your thing, because what might seem to you very revealing, very deep, might seem very trivial to somebody else. And so you don't want to go in here and sound trite. That's really something that's a danger, okay? So talk to your friends, okay? Talk to people, talk to older people. Have them, you know, what do you think about this when they say, why do you want to be a doctor? And I think you'll get some good feedback on that, okay? All right. Who are you? This should define yourself and convince the listener by the end that you are great for your chosen profession. I've already said that. It needs to be unique, and I just can't emphasize this enough. The last thing you want to do is sound like everybody else. And it happens, I would say, probably when I ask that question to people in my office, 95% of the time, the first thing that comes out of everybody's mouth sounds like everybody else, okay? And there's nothing, you know, wrong with that. You haven't been trained, you haven't thought about these things before, but it's important that you understand that, okay, before you go in there and start sounding like everybody else, because you don't want to take that chance that you get put in this pile of, who was that, right? You don't want to have that. Okay, here's some questions. Let's go through some questions. So, first question, what would you change about yourself? Let's think about the question first. Why would somebody ask a question like this? Why would they say, what would you change about yourself? Okay, so Ishan says asking for weaknesses. All right. Yeah.
Ways to improve yourself and knowing that you have some flaws in you.
Okay, ways to improve yourself. Yeah.
I think it's to get an idea of your self-image as well.
There is a self-image component to it, yeah. Okay.
Show that you can reflect on yourself.
It gives you a chance to reflect on yourself, and I would say that's probably actually pretty close to what I have in mind for it. Yeah.
I was thinking that gives you the chance to see you can be critical of yourself and recognize mistakes.
Okay, so that's maybe what the interviewer is thinking about. Now I want to know what you're thinking about. What do you see in this question? Okay, those are all reasons that the interviewer might ask the question. Okay, we're going to see a common thread that's going to come through all these. All right, so what goes through your head when somebody asks you this question? Yes.
How can I answer this question with looking like I'm insightful without actually damaging my credibility and reputation myself?
Okay, how can I answer this question without damaging the image of myself? I think is what you're saying, basically,
Yes.
right? Okay. So is this a positive question? Is this a negative question? It's a negative question, right? What would you change? Is this something you don't like? Something you don't like about yourself, you're going to change it, right? So I want to know what you want to change about yourself. Okay, so I want you to think more about what your impression of this question is, because most people won't get this, and after a while you'll start to get it. But what else do you see in this question? I don't bite. I really don't bite.
How you've allowed yourself to grow from your experiences.
How you've allowed yourself to grow, okay. Yeah.
Hope for the future.
Hope for the future, okay.
It gives you the opportunity to show that you are looking at problems you have right now and working on them, and you acknowledge them.
Okay, an opportunity for you to work on, to talk about problems that you're working on, basically, okay? Yeah.
A quality that doesn't seem as bad.
A what?
A quality that doesn't seem as bad.
A quality that doesn't seem as bad. Okay. So these are all sort of that, all right? But the way that you should look at this question is you should look at most casual questions. And by the way, this is a very casual question. This is mostly asked in just conversation. There's not really a great deal of depth that the interviewer gets out of this, all right? You know, well, I just want to stop murdering people, right? I mean, you know, what are you going to say here, right? I mean, that's not what's going to come out of a question like this. So they're just asking you common conversational type question. And for almost any conversational type question, you need to look at this as an opportunity. An opportunity, an opportunity, an opportunity. You're selling yourself, okay? You are selling yourself, all right? So you start out and you say, well, what would you change about yourself? Who wants to bite? Tiffany.
Growing up since I was young, I noticed that I have the ability to connect with people in the form of empathy. And this is what motivates me to want to help people, but
Okay.
at the same time, it can be a challenge because I can get so embedded and invested in wanting to help somebody that it can create a toll on myself.
Okay. Very good, very honest answer. I like that, okay? So honesty is a very important thing to have in an interview. And Tiffany's revealed a little bit of herself with this. She's very empathetic to the point of it causing problems for her, right? That's safe to say. Did I accurately say that? Okay. What did the interviewer hear when she said that? What did the interviewer hear? The interviewer, I think, and I'm not sure instability is the right word, but I think what the interviewer would hear is, if you are too caring, this may be difficult in life and death situations, right? And so the fact that you're working on it, okay, is good, but the bad is that you're working on it. You see what I'm saying? You recognize it, you're doing something about it, but I didn't hear it was solved. Okay? So, in a sense, and again, you're being honest, I'm not picking on that, all right? In a sense, if the interviewer hears this, then one of the things the interviewer thinks is, well, this person's going to have some difficulty managing things in a life and death situation. I'm not sure this person is ready. And ready is a really big issue. So thinking about in your answers how you don't leave it hanging is important. Now, I'm not asking anybody to lie, okay? She gave a very honest answer, and that's what I want to hear. But that's what the interviewer would hear in response to that question. Okay? Somebody else want to try? The more you guys give answers, the better people learn. If I make them up, they're not very real. Ian?
So kind of conversely, I found that I sometimes disconnect a little bit too much.
Okay.
And upon hitting college, I started in electrical and computer engineering, and I was working a lot with computers, equations, etc. And noticed that there was almost too much of a disconnect. And so I started trying to involve myself more with people through volunteering, etc. And started to connect more and realized that it's more beneficial.
Okay, so what Ian says is that he feels that he's the other way, that he's got not enough caring for people. He was more involved with machines than he was with people, and he recognized an issue with that and addressed it. Okay, so addressing it leaves that less open, leaves it less hanging. All right. Now what the interviewer is going to be thinking is, okay, so now I'm thinking about this. I want to see. All right, I'm going to be thinking, how do I know that you like people? All right. You haven't left it open, so it's not my imagination, but now I'm thinking about something else relevant to that, so that's going to color my next questions. And you'll see that's how your interview will frequently go. One question will lead to a related question that the interviewer is trying to learn something more about. Okay? All right, but again, not hanging, good principle. Let's go to another one. What would you change about medicine? It's one thing to change yourself. It's another thing to change the profession you want to go into. Who wants to touch this one? Yes, Toy.
I would have a more preventative approach
Okay.
rather than people getting sick and being treated for their sicknesses. Instead, if they all together had a very preventative approach to start off with.
Okay.
Regarding medicine.
Okay. So she would have a more preventative approach to medicine. Okay. Thoughts? You guys are a quiet group. Yeah, Ian?
So why are you not pursuing osteopathic, naturopathic, the fields of medicine that are very, very, very focused?
Okay. So she might be doing that, yeah. Okay. So making medicine more preventative, all right. I don't hear anything wrong in what she said. I think what she said is good. But there's something else more. Do you feel like you want more here? Yeah.
I would say involve yourself in the change.
Yeah. There you go. You want to try it? You want to take her answer and try it?
So I would involve myself in some research, you could take it in that direction, for determining ways that patients can go through educational aspects. Example is diabetes education.
Okay.
And that's been something that I've been involved with in my volunteer work. Diabetes clinics, I've been aiding diabetes educators
Okay.
They're
All right. So I just put her on the spot, and she's coming through wonderfully. All right. So what she's doing here is she's fleshing that out. Okay. So remember that when we look at questions and answers in an interview, that we don't do these as fill in the blanks. Okay. So what we heard here was a good answer, but it was sort of a fill in the blank answer. I think preventive medicine is important, and I think that's what I would change. I haven't fleshed it out. And I can't remember your name. Mary says is that, well, I would involve myself in it. This is a chance to show off yourself, right? And so what does she say? She says, I would get involved in things that I've already worked in. I'm working in a clinic where we have diabetes, and we see the very debilitating role that diabetes has. People can change their eating habits. There are things that they could do, and this is something I really would like to work on. The role of people not getting flu shots or vaccines, and people worried about that, and educating the public about the value and importance of getting vaccines, and something I'm very passionate about, okay? Flesh it out. Bring this question, make this question be part of you. Because in making it part of you, you're revealing yourself to them, and remember that the aim is you want them thinking about you as a doctor, not as a student answering a question on an exam, okay? Okay. Are you a leader? Nobody wants to touch that one. Are you a leader or are you a follower? What are you?
Is it okay to be a follower in this question, or do you want to?
I don't know. What do you think?
Probably not.
It's okay to be a follower if you don't know what you're doing, if you're learning.
Okay. So you're saying that it's not always right to be a leader.
No.
Okay? It's not always right to be a leader, right? Tiffany?
When going back to what you're saying about using this question as an opportunity,
Yep.
you could, well, being honest, you could state like, naturally since I was young, I always wanted to lead, and this is why I've been able to accomplish all these opportunities. But through this process, I've learned that there are other times that it's appropriate to be a follower when someone else is designated to lead, and you have the skills to be able to work under that person
Yes?
comfortably and still contribute.
Okay. So there's times that it's appropriate to lead, there's times it's appropriate to follow, and I agree with you completely. How more might we flesh this out? Yes?
Give an example.
Examples. Always think examples. Always think examples, okay? So you want to try it?
I'm in the Navy, I'm a naval officer. I've done 2 deployments on submarines, and while there, I drove the submarine into and out of ports, and managed the watch team, and also oversaw the construction of the newest submarine in the fleet, the USS California.
Okay, so you're not taking advantage, I think, of the Navy thing here. So there's some things that you're missing here in the Navy, right? You have people that you report to and people that you order, right? Okay, so when you're in the service, the real advantage you have is that where I fit in the scheme thing works really, really well. It's very obvious, right? Because you have rank, and where you fit in that rank means who you're reporting to, where you're the follower, and who you are giving orders to, where you're the leader, right? Okay, but service is a very, very good place to have that. Your own situations will be different, okay? But bring it back to yourself. Think about how you can make that answer be known, okay? What would you do if you found your best friend cheating on an exam? Boy, this is one students trip up on all the time. What do you do if you find your best friend cheating on an exam? Now that I've said that, nobody will want to answer this question. Yeah, Bailey?
I think I'd confront my friend probably after the exam
Okay.
and discuss with my friend first, basically, what were you thinking? And I think bring it to their attention of, what they're doing is kind of undermining what everyone else is doing. But given that, I don't think that it'd be my place to turn in my friend, and that would, after confronting him, I would have felt that I did the right thing, and bring this to his attention that
Okay.
he knows that
So-
he's caught.
So Bailey would make his friend aware of the fact that he saw it happen, and what were you thinking, and you are an idiot. Basically is what you're going to say, right?
I guess.
And you're not going to, okay, you're not going to turn him in. All right? Other answers. Mary.
So the way that I would see this question is understanding it as a long-standing problem for the friend. And there's a side of it that says, you know, this is your very good friend, and friends should be loyal to each other, and they shouldn't betray each other. But there's another side of it that says he's undermining the work that the, I'm assuming, university system has put into play in their entire history. You know, most universities, if it's a respectable university, will avoid students that cheat or will punish them in order to keep the reputation of the university.
And so what are you going to do?
So I would turn the friend in. It doesn't need to be known by the friend. I would do it anonymously because it's not, I don't think it should be a conflict of interest between my relationship with the friend, but it does hurt the university when people are doing these kind of things.
Okay, so Mary would turn the friend in anonymously. Okay, any other thoughts or questions? Or not questions, answers? Yes?
I feel that it's important being their friend to discuss this with them, but I feel like I would talk to them and say, you know, I saw this, I would really like you to turn yourself in, but if you don't, I will have to let them know. You know,
Okay.
be honest with them, but say, you know, that's not okay.
Okay, your name is?
Brianna.
Brianna would, then she would confront the friend and give them a chance to turn themselves in, and if they didn't, then she would turn the friend in. Okay? Yes?
I'm in the nuclear field,
Yes?
and there's an effect in nuclear power plants called the chill effect.
Yes?
And it's when you establish an environment where people are afraid to come forth with mistakes they've made
Yes.
for fear of retribution.
Right?
And I feel like a situation like this opens up a discussion on how are we setting up our system where people feel like their best bet is to cheat on something rather than to come forth and say, I need additional help or I made a mistake. And I think that a situation like this bars a discussion on the way we have established our entire system and what else we could do to better change it to where people don't feel like that's their only option.
Okay, okay. So I would almost call this the Sandusky effect.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So that's what happened there. That's what happened there. People were afraid of, you know, the power that these people had. And when they had enough power that the university president was afraid of that, that's a little scary, isn't it? Okay. This is a question that you have to think through quite a bit. This might be a part of an MMI question. MMI questions have many dimensions to them. And in answering a question, you want to think about all the different parameters here. You all have mentioned many of them. This is a friend of mine. I've got a conflict of interest. I've got professional honesty. I've got the integrity of my profession. I've got the fact that nobody said it, but I've got this person is cheating here. What are they going to do if they don't have the knowledge and they're treating a patient? Right? There's a very, very important principle here. And the principle here is that this is a professional issue. A professional issue. You are a member of a profession. When you're a student, you're already a member of that profession. And your job as a student or as a member of that profession is to hold up the highest ethical standards, period. And that doesn't matter if it's a friend of yours or whatever it is. It matters that you hold up the ideals of the profession. In my personal opinion, the way to handle this is exactly what Brianna said. You talk to the person and say, look, I saw it. I know what you did. All right? We've got two ways we can handle this. You can go turn yourself in, and if you don't, I'm going to have to turn you in. And I'm not doing it out of retribution. I'm not doing it for any other reason other than the fact that this is what a professional has to do. Okay? It's very, very important that you understand your role as a professional in this process. In everything that you do, part of what you're learning in this process of going and applying to medical school, and part of what you learn in medical school is becoming a professional. And that's so, so important. Okay? A professional is a person who holds ethical standards as the very highest things, the very highest thing. You cannot let that degrade, because when you do that, then you actually hurt the profession. And that's very, very important to understand. Okay. Describe a time in your life of personal growth. What kind of a question is this? Is this a negative question? I hope not. All right? What is it?
Who are you?
It's sort of who are you? Yeah. Okay.
Kind of reminds me of like, what's the hardest thing that ever happened to you?
This is not a hardest thing that ever happened to you. No. Although an element of that could be there. Okay. It could be. But I'm qualifying the question now. I'm thinking about the question itself. Okay. Now this is obviously an opportunity for you to sell yourself, right? You see this in this question very readily. This is what I call an open-ended question. Wide open. Boy, grab this ball and go with it wherever you want to go with this one, right? If you want to talk about the time that you were a gooky teenage kid and you had this awful way that you treated people and you learned something from that as an example of something where it was blew up in your face and you learned from that, great. Maybe you learned something about the value of hard work when you ran out of money in college and you had to take on 2 jobs to keep yourself going and da-da-da, and you became a more focused person and a hard worker as a result of that. It's wide open, absolutely wide open, okay? So go into your interviews with thoughts of these things in the back of your mind, like, well, you know, what's the message I want to be selling here? What's the take-home I want them to have, okay? Think about these. Write them down, okay? Because what happens when we get into an interview is we get in the middle of the interview and we're already tense, and when you get tense, you forget things, you know? You may have a great story, but you hadn't thought about it in advance and you didn't have that there. The night before your interview, write down everything that you can think about that is important in terms of messages that you want to get out. You probably won't get them all out. That's okay. But at least you will have reviewed those and they will be on the front of your mind the night before. And that will help you the day that you're there. It really will. Okay. What's the most difficult thing you've ever done? Now, this is the related question. What's the most difficult thing you've ever done? Okay. I think I mentioned this last time. Did I mention it in the last one? I did, okay. So we won't spend too much time on this one, but the most difficult thing you've ever done. This is the other question that you should have an answer memorized for, okay? And this is the question that I say really weeds out whether or not you've had adult experiences or not. This is a very, very important question, okay? What's the most difficult thing you've ever done? This is the one that I want you to memorize an answer, and the reason I want you to memorize an answer to this question is because you're already nervous, you're already anxious, and you want to have an answer here that shows that you've had adult experiences, okay? Most American kids today have been raised by helicopter parents. And you guys probably know what that means. Mom and dad's always fluttering around and watching, et cetera, et cetera. Not everybody, but it's way more common today than it was 20 years ago when those people who are interviewing you were raised, okay? You need to be aware of that. So if you're one of those who's had those helicopter parents who've always been there, a good example, do you talk to your parents on the phone more than once a week? Probably you got helicopter parents. Okay? Good rule of thumb. If you're talking to your parents more than once a week, you got to think about this. Okay? So, what is an adult experience? That's really what else is here. Give me an example of an adult experience. It doesn't have to be your own experience. What are some adult experiences?
Losing someone really close to you.
Okay, losing someone close to you.
When I was in the Navy, we had an incident happen where we got seawater in the battery, and I was in charge of the chemistry of the nuclear plant back there, and we were 5 days away from port.
Ah.
And we spent 5 days purging and trying to keep power to the plant and contain the casualty and keep the boat going so we can get back into port.
And the consequences of not doing well are pretty severe. Yes. Good personal experience. Other adult experiences. Yes, Mary.
Getting married or raising a kid.
Getting married, raising a kid. Prime example. What else?
Independence.
Okay. So what does independence mean?
Financial independence.
Financial independence. There's a great one. Okay. So financial independence. You know, I've been supporting myself ever since I left home at 18. I've never taken a dime from my parents. I work jobs. I take loans. I manage my affairs. Yeah. Great. What else? Do you have other thoughts on independence?
What about jail?
Jail. Well, interestingly enough, that can work. If you were a drug lord, I'm not sure they're probably going to be considering you, but the only way jail works is if you obviously had an incredible learning experience from it. Okay? I had, and I'll mention this since you brought up jail. I had a young man I worked with a few years ago, and he was very nervous about something. He was getting ready to apply to OHSU, among other schools, and he'd had both a DUI and possession of marijuana when he was a freshman in college. And his question to me was, should I tell them about it? So I'll ask you that question. Should you tell them about it, or should you not tell them about it? I see most people nodding, saying yes. The arguments in favor are what? Okay. Background check is going to show up, but there's probably more reasons to do it than the background check. Yeah.
You bring it up, it shows that you're honest and you have the maturity to face up and address that.
Okay. Okay. So being able to face up to your mistakes and, okay, what else?
You don't want to seem like you're hiding something.
You absolutely don't want to seem like you're hiding something. If you hide it and then they find out, they will kick you out. Because you have to say that, have you been convicted of, have you done any of these various things on your application? Okay. What else? There's something else that's here.
Show personal growth.
Personal growth. Okay. Again.
Professional, aspire professional.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is where your jail comment comes in. What you learn from the process of making a mistake is so important. Okay. Yeah, I make mistakes. Yeah, we all make mistakes. Some mistakes are bigger than others. Some mistakes are going to keep you from medical school. Okay. But, you know, you get a minor in possession, right? Or you get a possession of marijuana. They're probably not going to keep you out of medical school, but they will get you kicked out of medical school if you don't report them, okay? So I told him this, and he was very anxious about this. He says, well, it probably means they're never going to take me. And I said, well, you know, you got to be honest. You got to go forward with it. Well, of course they took him. He's currently a student up at OHSU right now, okay? And because he revealed it, he didn't have to worry anymore after that because he already told them. They knew it when they considered him, and they said that was okay, right? But if he hadn't told them, then the entire time he's there and the entire time he's a physician, he's worried, is it going to get pulled away, right? Very important to get it out there. All right. More adult experiences. What if you don't have an adult experience? What if you've had helicopter parents and you've had everything that's been taken care of, and you haven't faced death, and you haven't faced hunger, and you haven't faced many things that other people, you haven't faced the nuclear reactor that's getting ready to melt down? What do you say?
You speculate on future events you know you're coming up to.
Such as? Speculate on future events, Mary says.
Everyone's parents are going to die at some point.
I would say no, okay? Because again, all you can do is speculate on your reaction to that. So I would say no. I don't think speculation is going to help you there. Okay? Yes, Ian?
Put yourself in a position where you can at least observe some difficult choices, like shadowing positions, etc.
Say that again. I'm not sure I understood.
So whether or not you yourself have come across something extremely difficult, putting yourself in a position before you get to the interview stage of observing difficult decisions taking place, like shadowing.
I see. So finding, okay, so you're talking about seeing examples where difficult decisions are being made and learning from that is basically what you're saying. Okay. Yes?
Yeah, like helping a friend through a difficult situation. If you can't pull from your own experiences, maybe you talk about an experience that you were indirectly involved in and how that influenced you and how you could see yourself handling other situations that are similar.
Okay, so Josh says to talk about helping a friend through a situation or watching somebody else go through. It's a little bit related, I think, to what Ian is saying here also. Okay, those are possible, all right? But the thing that comes to my mind, and I think this is a principle I want everybody to keep in mind, is honesty is always the best policy. The more you try to make a relevant answer to this question, the more defensive you're going to sound. Okay? So, how about saying, you know, I have had a pretty darned easy life. My parents made a fair amount of money. I didn't have to work as hard as many of my friends did to go to school. I've had good health. My parents and so forth have had good health, so I haven't really had to deal with death. Obviously, with money, I didn't need to worry about that. So I can't tell you that I had a very difficult life to lead, okay? And I recognize that you can grow from adversity. I think people grow from adversity a lot, okay? So, but what I have done with the life that I have and the advantage that I've had is I've applied it wherever I could to make a difference elsewhere, okay? Because I didn't have to work when I was in college, I was able to volunteer more and do more over here. Because I was always healthy, I didn't have that worry in the back of my mind all the time, am I going to have to, or am I going to be able to handle this chemotherapy? I made better grades because of that. You see what I'm saying? So there is where, if you think about my principles of growth, insight, maturity, you've just given some insight right there, big insight. I'm not trying to convince you that I've had a difficult life because I haven't, okay? But I am an insightful person, and that really makes a difference as well, okay? So you turn it around a little bit. You make this question into something that works to your advantage. And that's true for almost any question that you've got. You can use this question to your advantage. Questions or comments? Yes?
What happens if the doctor you're asking, like, how are you going to think you're going to be able to handle the life and death situation that you're getting?
So how do you think okay, so I'll ask you that question right here. How do you think you're going to be able to handle a life or death situation?
Well, I don't know.
Oh, well, you don't want to say that. It's okay to say that here, though.
The thing is, I'm like one of those kind of kids where I had like
Yeah.
money with parents, I had home
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah.
I haven't really had true adversity at first, so I don't really know when they like come at me.
Okay.
You know.
So how are you going to handle a life or death situation? You've had helicopter parents and you've never had to deal with it before. How are you going to handle it? What are you going to tell them? All right, this is a question that's surprisingly easy to answer, okay? So one of the things to think about is that in the process of going through medical school, the thing that you think of the most is, well, I'm going to learn how to do surgery. I'm going to learn all the anatomy. I'm going to learn the physiology, and I'm going to learn all these various things. But part of what you're going to learn in medical school is also how to handle situations. That part of growth and becoming a professional I'm talking about, medical school is going to teach you that too. And so you put this one back on them, you know. Well, you know, that's a really good question. I'm a caring person. I'm a person who really wants to make a difference in people's lives. And never having dealt with a life and death situation in terms of being the person in charge of that, I would wager that most people don't have that responsibility either as they're learning to become a physician. They might have seen somebody die, but they're not overseeing somebody dying. That's a very different kind of a thing. I expect that the medical school is going to teach me that as I'm going through. Make sense? That's something that you're expecting, your training is going to come through in a medical program. Okay, this is good. Other questions? This is good if you guys have questions for me. I'm happy to answer. Yes?
For this question, for me, one big thought that comes up, and this situation I think will come up in my personal statement as well, so it's another way to talk about this, but involves when I decided to change gears, when I decided to take one life goal and stop before I had actually reached that goal, and I can explain why, and move on to a new one. But my concern is that it'll sound like, oh, well, she quit before she, reached.
Okay, so part of you're saying, I think what you're saying, Brianna, is part of your answer would say that I had a different goal and I changed, and that was a difficult thing for me to do, and that you're concerned that they will think about that as that you're a quitter. Okay? What do you guys think about that? We can answer that with some principles we've been dealing with already. What's the number one principle based on what she just said?
Insight.
What's that?
Insight. You should insight like maturity that actually like they don't want to
Well, maybe, but that's not what I heard in her answer though, or in what she had to say.
The story as to why you changed.
Right. We got to hear the whole story here. So if you just say, well, I had something and I changed and I went to this, then you're going to leave in the mind, you're going to leave it completely open in the mind of the interviewer. Maybe the interviewer will think you're a quitter, right? So when you say that, I had always thought I wanted to be I had this happen, I always wanted to be a veterinarian. And I worked, and I worked in animal clinics and I really fond of dogs, and I came to OSU, and I enrolled in animal science, and I was pre-vet because that was what I was really convinced I wanted to do. And I got to my sophomore year, and all of a sudden the light changed, and I realized that my compassion that I had, I love animals, but I love things, and what I really care about are people. And so I thought, I wonder if this is something that I want to go in and try. And so I explored it, and I went and I did some shadowing of doctors, and I went and did some things, and I found there was a whole dimension to this that I had never thought about before. You know, that doesn't sound to me like a quitter. That sounds like an evolution. Now, I've given you a situation where you can evolve that. Now, I don't know what your situation was, but fleshing that out really makes a difference for the person, because then they know what you're going through and what you've thought about in that process. So don't leave it at I've changed without giving that story there. Okay? All right. A lot of time here. I said I wasn't going to spend much time on it. I spend more time on that than anything else. What's the craziest thing you've ever done? I have 2 reasons for asking this question. 2 reasons. Yeah. What are the 2 reasons I asked this question? Everybody's smiling. They like this question. Yes?
To gauge what you determine as crazy.
Okay. To gauge what you determine as crazy. That actually almost covers the 2 reasons. And that one answer right there. So maybe there's 1 reason. So you nailed it. Okay. So maybe you did something pretty stupid, right? And hopefully you learned something in that process. But if this is a place where if you talk about something crazy again, got to tell the whole story, tell what you learned, give the insight, give the whole business about it. And the other reason I ask this question is I'd like to see this. Have you done anything fun in your life? You know? Have you always been just sitting there, just studying, and you're the most boring person on earth? You've never gone out and done anything except what was in a book? You know? Books are great and learning is great, but have you lived a life? Have you had a life? You know? Going out and, I don't know, chasing fireflies in the dark and running over a cliff and falling, 20 feet and breaking your arm. Okay? That was pretty crazy to do, right? But hey, it was fun, right? Taking a gun into a 7-Eleven and doing a pretend hold-up, maybe that wasn't the smartest thing to do, right? Okay? So you got to think about what your crazy thing is. But these can be fun, okay? This brings up an important point also, and that is, well, should I be a cut-up? Should I make a joke? Should I be funny in my interview? Okay? And personally, I think most people are way too serious in their interviews. I don't want you going in there and being a comedian, and I don't want you going in there telling jokes and so on and so forth. Okay? I do that in class, but you can't do that in an interview. Okay? I don't want you going in there and telling jokes, but making self-deprecating humor will make you a real person to them. Okay? Self-deprecating humor just a little bit is really, really good. It says you're not so full of yourself that you can't have a good time. So I would tell this story, and as I told this story, I would think of a funny one, and I would laugh as I was telling this story. I really would. I look at the emotion a person has when they're telling the answer to a question as an indication of how nervous they are. Okay? There's a question I always tell students that you can get asked in an interview. It's sometimes asked in a casual sense because the interviewer doesn't have any notion of what to ask you. By the way, many interviewers will be that way. They're there, they're bored, they don't know what to do, and maybe some of them haven't even been very well trained in being an interviewer, and they'll just come up. That's where you get these weird off-the-wall questions. Okay? You may get a lot of casual questions, but this one question I tell students when you hear it, it's to remind you that the interviewer is a friend. And the question is, what do you do for fun? What do you do for fun? Okay? I ask a student that question, okay, when I think they're nervous and they need to get the wheels turning a little bit. And I'm asking them that to give them that chance to kind of get the wheels turning. All right? And if I ask them that question and they answer that question very seriously, I know that they're not going to come out of that shell. I know that they're so nervous that they can't, they just can't smile. All right? And if there's one question you want to be smiling on, and you want to be smiling on most of these as you're going through, but if there's one question you want to be smiling on, it's what do you do for fun, okay? Because what do you do for fun has got to be relaxing you. If you can't look like you're relaxed in your interview, then you've really hurt your cause an awful lot. Very important. When have you gone against the prevailing opinion? I'm going to ask you guys to answer this one. When have you gone against the prevailing opinion? Anybody? Nobody's ever gone against the prevailing opinion? Brianna?
So I was a competitive track and field runner.
Uh-huh.
And I had a number of coaches over the years, and for the most part, I followed what they said and enjoyed success. And at one point, after I had had a certain coach for a number of years, I was not feeling well, and things were going downhill, and I talked to him about it, and...
Going downhill is good for a runner, right? I mean, it's a bad joke.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not exactly on a track.
No, okay.
You know? But I was not improving. I was feeling terrible. And I finally said, you know, we really need to have a meeting. We need to talk about this. This is not working for me. And I sat down and I said that something needs to change. And it was difficult, and it took a few weeks of hashing back and forth what exactly it was that needed to change. And it's a difficult thing because you have the coach who's supposed to be superior, but you're working as a team. And so we found a solution and moved forward.
Okay, very good answer. So you can't see, you know, I see Brianna as she's answering this question. One of the things in this question is strength of character. Strength of character, okay? I want to see strength, okay? You gotta have a story that shows strength, and you've got to tell that story with strength. Brianna just did this wonderfully, okay? She looked at me, she didn't change her inflection, she didn't change her expression, she just had this is the way it was, and her story was rock solid, okay? If I asked you that question in an interview, I'm very happy with what you just told me, all right? Because that strength of character comes through. You cannot, underline this, you cannot demonstrate weakness of character in an interview. Okay, you want a sure way to have them give you another year to grow up. That'll be it right there. If you can't show strength of character in your answers, okay. Now, for some people, that actually means, and I had a student. I usually like the smile, right? The smile says, "I'm friendly, I'm relaxed." This is probably one you don't want to be smiling too much on. You want to look serious on this one. You want to look determined on this one, right? I had a student recently, and she was just smiling constantly. You know, tell me about your grandmother dying. Well, you know, that's not what I want to see, right? And so there's times, obviously, where you're not going to do that. But I finally had to tell her, just work on your frowning. Because she was projecting this image that was too light in many of the answers that was there. And so I say, you lose a little bit, but I think you need to look more serious in your answers. So sometimes that does happen. And you weren't frowning, by the way, but you looked very serious in what you had to say. Somebody else had their hand up. All these weak characters now. Okay, you want to do it?
So my fraternity had a dry house policy, and one of our officers, who was, in my opinion, very good at his job, got caught. And so I was a member of the standards board, who basically hands down punishments, and it was, except for me, unanimous to expel him. And I stood up and said, look, I understand, but I think the house would be worse off removing someone who brings so much to the house over such a small matter.
Okay, okay. Let's see, let me think about that one. Any comments on what he had to say? What's your name?
Jesse.
Jesse. The concern I have about that is that it's okay to go against your peers. I think that's good. I would worry about the trivializing of an alcohol issue. That's the only thing I can think of there. And that was one interpretation I would get out of that. But you did go against prevailing opinion. That's what I asked you. And so I would give you credit for that, definitely. Other thoughts? Other volunteers? Mary?
So I have a story that I don't know whether or not it demonstrates strength of character or kind of goes against this theme that you're asking us to stick to. So I'll just tell you and get some feedback. Over the summer, I went camping in Diamond Lake, Oregon with 4 friends of mine that I've known for a while, and we went out into the middle of nowhere. It was on a dusty dirt road in the mountains. I had no idea where we were. My GPS on my phone was not working, so I was basically stuck
Out there, yeah.
with these people. We got there at about 9 at night. It was dark. We started setting up tents, and every one of them started bringing out guns.
Oh.
Each one of them had brought multiple guns. So we were out there. My family didn't know where I was. My husband didn't know where I was, and all they knew was that I was at Diamond Lake, but nobody knew that there were so many guns.
Okay.
So I immediately said something about it. I said, I'm not comfortable with this. Would you guys put them away? But they would not put them away.
Okay.
And I should have known at that time that I should have just gone right back out the way we came, and I should have just gotten myself out of that situation, because I could see that it was going to get worse and worse throughout the trip, but I did not do that.
Okay.
So now I know that if I'm in a situation like that, if I were in that situation tonight, I would never handle it the same way I did before. I would say something, ask them to put them away, and if it didn't go through to their minds, I would get out of there.
Okay. All right. So what do you guys think about that answer? Interesting sort of dimensions of that answer. Did she show strength of character? Yes.
I think she just chose character, but I kind of want to know what actually happened.
Okay. I don't think we need to know what actually happened. I think our curiosity is there. I understand. But in terms of the answer, so she showed strength of character, but she didn't show follow through because she didn't leave, right? Maybe she thought the consequences of follow through were that she'd get lost on the way back, and it's dark, and I'm guessing that was probably a factor for you. Is that right? And so in hindsight, you see that it was something that you should have risked, but at the time you weighed that risk and you felt that you were safer with the guns than you were leaving that's right? So that's basically the issue that was there. In hindsight, you've reevaluated that, and if you told that to an interview board, what do you think they would say? Yeah.
I think showing that you're capable of reevaluating past experiences and grow from those by trying to stick to your guns.
Stick to your guns? Okay. Don't stick to your guns. I think that's the, yeah.
Exactly. Shows that you're capable of growing from what you've learned, and
Okay.
that you're aware that things that you thought were the right choices when you were younger aren't necessarily
Okay.
the right choices.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that also. I think that we can reevaluate and learn from that, and I think that's what I would take from that message also. Okay, what else do we have here? Questions? What do you think about doctor-assisted suicide? This is starting to get into the MMI territory. MMI, okay? So MMI questions will usually relate to some ethical dilemma, some ethical problem, and they are multi-dimensional. So if I ask you this question, I want somebody to tackle it.
Are we in Oregon?
We're in Oregon. It's a good question, okay? Because if they ask you this question in Ohio, then you need to make sure that you know that the law in Ohio is different than the law is in Oregon. Okay, so let me give you some background for this. So this is a question that students trip up on when they view it, as they view many questions, as a fill-in-the-blank answer. They've asked me what my opinion is. I tell them what my opinion is. I don't think there should be doctor-assisted suicide. Or, yeah, I think there should be doctor-assisted suicide. Okay? Now, if I just said it as that, the principle you've seen already is I'm leaving them thinking, what does this person's perspective really? I haven't fleshed it out. Okay? And fleshing it out is really, really important for an ethical dilemma. All right? Ethical dilemmas bring forth a principle that I call framing the question that you should learn. And framing the question will help you in many ways. Okay? Framing the question means you define the problem before you answer the question. All right? Defining the problem. Defining all the dimensions of the problem before you put yourself into it. Just because they said, what is your opinion on that, doesn't mean the first words that have to come out of your mouth are, well, I think, da-da-da. Okay? This is what I describe to students. It comes out as often as, this. You sound like a politician. Okay? And politicians are notorious for avoiding direct answers, but politicians are also very good at framing the question. They will usually frame it the way they want so they can make their answer work. Your job is to frame the question as broadly and as objectively as you can, giving both sides to the problem. Define what the person who thinks that doctor-assisted suicide is evil thinks, why they think that. And define what the person who thinks that doctor-assisted suicide should be available to anybody who wants it, why they think what they think. This is a question that wherever you go, if you're from Oregon, you can expect you may get this question. It's a stereotype, okay? Oh, you're from Oregon. What do you think about doctor-assisted suicide? If you go into an interview and you don't know how to speak articulately about doctor-assisted suicide and you're from Oregon, you just said, I don't pay any attention to what goes on around me. Okay? This one, I want everybody to research, know what the law says, and have an articulate way of describing the different positions that I just told you. Okay? This is a very, very important question. And this is one where you're going to have a hard time fitting it in 2 minutes. This might be part of an MMI, and in an MMI, you've got 8 minutes. It might take you 8 minutes to describe all this right here. Okay? So what you think will come only after you've defined the parameters of the problem. Okay? And think broadly, broadly, broadly. Have you ever done anything illegal? I'm going to ask this question. There's a different question that this is really asking.
Are you human?
Are you honest? Right? If you say no, and they say, you never sped? You never got a parking ticket? Right? Okay. To me, that's a really simple, that's an important question, okay? Now, if they ask you that question, and you've got that minor in possession, or you've got that possession of marijuana, okay, when you were 18 years old or whatever, or 58 or whatever, okay? I'm 58, so. Okay? This is one place to clear the air. Presumably you've cleared the air in the personal statement that you've written or in something else that you've written for them. But if you don't reveal it here, okay, then you're being deceptive. And that's another reason this question's is asked, okay? Because they gave you the chance to come clean. They gave you the chance to say what was there, and you didn't do it. You lied about something very critical. That could be reasons for kicking you out. Describe how you handled your last conflict. Now, a guy in the Navy might have a little different answer than somebody else does for this. I don't know. So I'm stereotyping here, aren't I? So, how did you handle your last conflict? Okay, let's bring our principles to play here. What are we going to do? How are we going to answer this? Tell a story. Okay. What's the story? What are we going to tell in this story? Well, I got into an argument with my roommate about paying the bills on time. My roommate doesn't want to pay the bills on time, and I think it's important that we get the bills paid on time. And so we had a long argument about this. What did I just say? Very trivial. You didn't handle the conflict. We got into an argument, and that was that, right? Okay. So, I talk about what the conflict is, okay? And then I talk about the importance of resolving conflict, right? The importance of, and the perspective that you see, okay? How you deal with that, right? You want to stand up. You got a chance here, again, to make yourself look like maybe a peacemaker, maybe look like a person who solves problems, all right? Or a person who has a broad perspective, okay? Wow, I was involved on campus and we had this giant a conflict in our student organization, okay, about whether or not we wanted to admit people who were, I don't know, transgender, for example, okay? And there was a big argument about that, and some people said there's no way that we're going to do that. And I said, you know, we got to think about this, okay? That we have to be broad-minded in the way that we go forward, in the way that we handle people, and not everybody's the same. And not everybody's the same both in the way that they present themselves, but also in the way that they think. And so that conflict that I had mentally with these people were the same conflicts that they were having mentally with people they didn't like. And so it was important for me to treat the person I was arguing with respect the same way it was important for that person who didn't like these other people to treat them with respect. Right? So again, you show yourself another dimension of yourself if you do that. What's the most important political movement of the past 20 years? I see a lot of nervous smiles. Okay? This is important, okay? In my interview class, some of you may be in my interview class next term, I'll give you a warning. I give a pop quiz in the class every term. And I ask them to reveal, yeah?
The fall of the Berlin Wall, end of the Cold War.
Okay, end of the Cold War, great. What else? One brave soul.
Arab Spring.
Arab Spring. Okay, very interesting, yeah.
Election of a black president.
Election of a black president.
Legalization of marijuana.
Okay. We have a little bias here. Okay, so it's important to read the newspaper, whether that's online or wherever. It's important to know what's going on in the news, all right? Absolutely important. To be able to speak intelligently about it, all right? Everybody gave me a one-line answer here, and I realize you're not going to give me a multi-line answer here, but if you say that it was the fall of the Berlin Wall, which is about 20 years ago, okay, then I would want you to be able to elaborate that a little bit so that you're, again, revealing depth in yourself, in your knowledge of the situation. So anything that you come up with here should be something that you've got a good reason for answering and a good story to tell with that, all right? Now, reading the newspaper, reading the news is so important. If you go interview at Ohio State University, I pick on Ohio because it's been in the news so much lately. If you go interview at Ohio State University, okay, you darn sure better be reading their news for a couple of weeks before you go there. So if you're sitting around having lunch with somebody, you might even be able to say something intelligent about what's been happening in their community. You might also think about the fact that Ohio State University is a state school. And a state school, why should a state school be spending state money to train somebody from Oregon to go and be a doctor and go back to Oregon? What's in it for Ohio State University? Maybe if you sounded a little bit interested in the place you were going to live, that would be good. Because maybe you might want to live there after you graduated and be a practicing physician in their home state. But if you go in there and you don't know anything about Ohio and you don't know anything about the school, and you don't know anything about the local community, the message is, I'm not going to be a part of this. Why should they take you? Okay? State schools especially are important in this respect. Private schools are different, but state schools are very important in this respect. Why should our state spend money on you? You know, you're just going to go back to Oregon. Okay. MMI. So I come up with a couple specific MMI questions for you. Principal, frame the question as I've shown you before. Very, very important. Frame the question. All right? Here we go. In a routine physical, you discover your patient has a tumor previously unknown. The patient is ready to leave for a dream vacation they have planned for years. What do you do? Now, the way I would tackle a question like this is I would talk about all the variables that's in this story. And the mistakes students make is they turn around and they want to start asking questions. It's okay to ask maybe a question if you're uncertain about something. But in asking questions about situations here, this is the whole situation that you see on the thing. You need to take those questions that you want to ask and turn them into variables that you're describing. All right? So you might say, well, how old is the patient? Okay? Instead of saying, how old is the patient, you might say, well, there's several things to think about here, okay? This person has dreamed about this vacation for years. So if they are an older patient and this has been a dream of a lifetime, then I think about this in a different way than this is somebody who's been saving up money for the past 3 or 4 years and they're 30 years old, right? So think about those questions that you might have and turn those questions into part of your answer. It's okay to ask a question or two if you're just not sure about something, but for the most part, this is an exploration that you should be doing in your own mind. Now, I have an exercise I teach students in my class. I'm running a little bit long here, but I'm going to give you this exercise to get you thinking about it, okay? This is an exercise I call the thinking on my feet exercise, and I've shown it to a couple of you before. And it works if you practice it and you do it, okay? You need to learn to start thinking about all the different parameters here, which means you're sitting here nervously thinking, oh my God, can I think of all the things that are there? You need to learn to think on your feet. And the exercise goes as follows. I give you a word, and you give me a story for a minute about that word, verbally. Okay? I'm not going to make you do it here. If I say sand, then you say, well, I remember the time I went to Cannon Beach in Oregon, and the great big sandy beach, the wonderful view that was out there. It was in October, and we like to build sandcastles. And the sandcastles that we built that day, they were having a contest. And it was remarkable because some of the sandcastles were as large as an automobile. And they made them out there on the seashore, and I couldn't believe, in fact, the things that they were able to construct with that, all knowing that it was going to get washed away. And I thought it was the most amazing thing. Okay, so there's your blah, blah, blah story. All right? What you do in the telling of this story is you're pulling something out, you're sort of associating things. I'm thinking sand, I'm thinking vacation, I'm thinking give me some details, I'm blowing it out there. The second part of the exercise is after that's done, you have to tell another story about sand with respect to medicine. And what you learn in the process of going through this exercise is you learn to be thinking about what that sand means with respect to medicine, okay? And you're thinking about it while you're talking, okay? You need to learn to think while you're talking because it'll get you ahead when you need to plan for an answer, okay? So when you're sitting here starting to come up with the various variables that are here and you're talking about them out loud, you're thinking in the back of your head about the other things that need to be considered as well. Okay? Because one of the things you're going to get the most nervous about in your interview is silence. Silence will kill you. I've got to stop and I've got to think. And then it just gets worse. Okay? So being able, I'm not saying you shouldn't be silent because there's times you can be silent and be very effective. Okay? But silence will kill you if you're trying to come up with something and you can't come up with something. So you need to learn to think on your feet with this. All right? Practice this. I tell students you need to practice this for a couple of hours. You need to have a very patient friend that gives you a word. You blather on for a minute about that word, and then you come back with that word in your chosen profession. Okay? And it will help you to pull this out. Okay? Now, let's just go through here as an exercise briefly. What are the parameters we need to be thinking about? I'm going to check my camera here real quick. Anybody? Nobody, I guess.
Reference back to the tumor.
Okay, what about the tumor? What did you say?
Ultimately, it's not your decision. Your job is to educate the patient on the options available to them and how you feel that they should best pursue a treatment plan. But ultimately, it's their decision whether or not they want to take that treatment.
Okay, so you're getting at you're starting to get into answer. Okay, so I'm not ready for answer. I'm thinking of dimensions here. So you said tumor. All right. So what are dimensions of tumor?
Whether it's growing, whether it's serious, where it is, all sorts of things.
What's the nature of the tumor, right? So a tumor that is a prostate tumor in a person who's 75 years old is probably not something that's immediately going to kill them. If it was previously undiscovered at that age, they grow very, very slowly. Something that's a lung cancer tumor that gets discovered late is a very, very different sort of situation, right? Okay, so say those things. Say those things. Just like you're telling your story. Get these out. What else? Yeah.
You want to know how long we were going on vacation for?
How long? Yeah. Is this a round the world tour? You're going to be gone for 2 months? Or is you've always wanted to go to Australia and you're going to be back in a week? Right? What else? Yeah.
The personal history of the patient, if you have any, like, family history.
Okay. Family history? Okay, what else?
What is their current state of health?
Current state of health. So, okay, yeah. So again, think about these answers now in terms of what you're going to say. I don't want to just throw them out there, but what are you going to say about this? Yeah, Brianna.
Oh, I just had another one of just wondering how far along, did you just, have you done all the testing on it? Do you know everything about it, or have you just found this and
Okay.
you haven't sent it to the pathologist or something like that?
Okay.
How
Okay.
much do you know about the tumor?
So you've got a lump on an X-ray, for example. Okay. Yeah. Mary, do you have a hand up?
I was going to say availability of radiographs.
Okay.
Immediate time frame.
Okay. So we're all thinking medical here. So there's other things besides medical. Yeah.
I was gonna see what their financial situation was and how much healthcare coverage they had, because they could cancel that vacation and use that money towards covering potentially actually.
Well, that's the financial side of it's possible. Yeah, that's I hadn't thought about that, but that's certainly a variable. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
The impact of treatment on quality of life versus the age.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a central one here. From this description they've planned for years, you get the impression this person probably is an older person, maybe, and maybe this has been a big dream vacation. And so what's quality of life going to be when you're going through chemotherapy? What if this tumor is going to kill you? I just learned of a friend this past week who has a tumor that they didn't know about, and they've been told it's probably going to kill them in a year. Okay? So what do you do when you have that situation? Maybe this person would want to go on the vacation. Do you want to ruin their vacation and tell them? What do you think?
You probably have an obligation, you have to tell them, and then it's up to them to decide what they want to do.
I would tend to think that. There are people who will argue the other way. And it's one that, again, ethical questions can be answered, can be argued either way. This is a real good ethical question, I think. Okay? In an ethical question, the way that you come across and the strength of your answer is really going to be very valuable in how they see you. This is why a little training in debate can be wonderful. Being able to think of those different perspectives and be able to give those perspectives and then defend a point of view that you have. Okay? And I don't have an answer for that. I think if someone asked me that question and they said this person is 75 years old and they've always wanted to go around the world, and I felt that this tumor wasn't going to kill them before they went on the around the world trip, but they was probably going to kill them anyway, I'd think, maybe that would be good. I don't know. It's tough, but I agree. I think that you have to think, you have an obligation to tell your patient, let the patient make intelligent decisions, but that may also color the way that they see stuff. Yeah.
I just wonder if, as a physician interviewer, if you say something like that, if that's like a huge red flag, like essentially keeping something from the patient for that long of a period of time. Maybe you're talking about like, oh, they're going to be gone for a week, and realistically, it's realistic that maybe you wouldn't know everything for a couple of days into their vacation, something like that. But
yeah. No,
I'm concerned about answering.
I agree. But what you can do in your answer is you can say, talk about those perspectives. One person might say, here's what you should do, et cetera, et cetera. But I would have some concern with this because I don't think that physicians should ever be dishonest in anything that they're doing. And so by not telling the patient the full story here, I am being deceptive, and that's a type of dishonesty, right? So that's perfectly good. But I would incorporate all of these answers into what I had to say. Your own perspective is going to, will vary indeed. Okay. Another MMI, and then we're almost done. You have a colleague who's been acting a bit erratic lately. You suspect drugs may be involved. What do you do? Colleague meaning a fellow physician. Dimensions. What are the different things that we have to think about here?
What about damaging their character? If they're not doing drugs and start throwing accusations, it could ruin them.
Okay, so let's think about I guess you're sort of there. Okay, I'll leave that alone. Yeah.
The term colleague is really vague. They could be a close personal.
I'm saying it's a fellow physician. Fellow physician.
Yeah, but I'm saying for part of framing it, the degree of interrelationship.
Oh, I see.
Go to them or go to the supervisor.
Is this a friend of yours, or is this somebody who's on the same staff, but yeah. Okay, good. Yeah.
Do you have knowledge of their personal life or other causes to
Okay.
erratic behavior?
Okay. Yes, Mary?
Are we talking about illegal drugs or correctly used prescription drugs?
Ooh, yeah, okay. So maybe they're on pain medication, and when they're on pain medication, they're a little weird. What would that happen? What would you think about that? You've got your colleague that on pain medication for a legitimate reason. They've got a back problem. I knew a veterinarian one time had this, and he was really weird when he was on his pain medication. Okay.
Sounds like house.
I don't watch TV, so I don't know what this is, but yeah.
What is that colleague's impact on other people's health?
Exactly. Yeah. Boy, I worry about that. So when you see that and you think that there's potential for impact on other person's health, then I think you have to be involved, don't you? It's kind of like the cheating on the exam. You know, that you see this, you think that you have to intervene some way, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. What else? What else is here?
Scope is eradicated.
Okay. Are they jumping up and down and whistling, or are they just humming and driving everybody nuts, right? Okay.
What is that made you suspect they're using drugs?
Okay. Okay. Now again, you guys instinctively are asking the whats. You're asking these mostly as questions, and I want you to get in the habit when you're doing these of thinking of these as describing scenarios. Okay. Very important to do that. You want to get in the practice of doing that. So you want to take some of these questions and practice describing them as these are the variables that I would think about in my evaluation. Okay. And then in the end, you want to take those variables, and those variables want to come together with an answer of what you're going to do. All right. Very important to do that. Okay. That's the end of what I have tonight. I have a listserv where I announce all these various things. It's called UG Research. If you send an email to that address, you will get on the listserv, and you'll get notifications of these various events that I hold. I've done a bunch of previous talks, and I have materials. You're not going to write this all down right here. I understand that. What I will do is I will send out to that listserv the link about how to get all this. And if you don't want to be on there, you want to send me an email, I will send it to you, so you don't have to be on the listserv. But this has various videos I've done before, how to get involved in undergraduate research. A lot of these are research-based, how to complete a URISC. Guide to preparing for professional schools, that's a really important one. I gave a talk to my freshman class about this, but I think there's some important things in there for everybody. And my guide to acting, that's part 1, and then I'll have part 2 here as well. Okay. I also will post this on, there's a Facebook page that many of you got invited to on that, and I'll post this on the Facebook page as well. So any last comments or questions before we close for the evening?
Just go back to that. Go back to the list of. Yeah,
Yes. Yes. So that's it's UG Research -join, all one thing, no space. All right, so how many people here have interviews scheduled? Okay. How many people here have had interviews? Nobody's had interview. Okay. Well, good luck in your interviews, and I hope this is all helpful to you. So see you around.
Thank you.
You bet. Everybody get the stuff up here? Catching this up? Okay. Certainly, Tiffany. Good to see you. Take care, Tali.